In this series, we will be reading the lore text about the world of Azeroth from the book World of Warcraft Chronicle, Volume 1. This episode covers the beginning of the third chapter, Ancient Kalimdor. Chapter 3, Ancient Kalimdor, the Empire of Sul, and the Awakening of the Akir. 16,000 years before the Dark Portal, for generation after generation, life bloomed across the ordered world of Azeroth. Nowhere was this more evident than in the dense woodlands around the Well of Eternity. The fount of Azeroth's arcane lifeblood accelerated the cycles of growth and rebirth. Before long, sentient beings evolved from the land's primitive life forms. Among the first and most prolific were the trolls, a race of savage hunter-gatherers who flourished in Azeroth's jungles and forests. Though the trolls were of only average intelligence, they possessed incredible agility and strength. Their unique physiology also allowed them to recover from physical injuries at an astonishing rate, and they could even regenerate lost limbs over time. The early trolls developed a wide array of superstitious customs. Some practiced cannibalism and devoted themselves to warfare. A rare few sought knowledge through mystic practices and meditation. Still others honed their ties to a dark and powerful form of magic known as voodoo. Yet no matter their individual customs, what all trolls shared was a common religion that revolved around Kalimdor's elusive wild gods. The trolls called these powerful beings Loa, and they worshipped them as deities. Due to their reverence for the wild gods, the trolls gathered near a series of peaks and plateaus in southern Kalimdor. This was home to many of their honored Loa. The trolls gave the holy mountain range the name Zandalar, and soon they built small encampments upon its slopes. The most powerful group of trolls was called the Zandalar tribe. Its members claimed nearly all of Zandalar's tallest plateaus, believing them to be sacred ground. Atop the highest peaks, they constructed a small cluster of crude shrines. In time, these grew into a bustling temple city known as Zuldazar. Over the next several centuries, other tribes arose to challenge the Zandalari for territory and power. The most notable of these were the fearsome Gurubashi, Amani, and Drakari. The Gurubashi and Amani in particular laid claim to enormous swaths of land in Kalimdor's lush jungles and woods. On occasion, tribes clashed, often over hunting grounds. Yet major conflicts were few and rarely lengthy. Trolls were such skilled and fierce fighters that any real conflict would cost both sides dearly. Untouched land was plentiful in all directions, and the various tribes quickly learned it was wiser to resettle than risk war. Only one place was forbidden by the tribe's witch doctors and priests, a small mound of blackened stone at the base of the Zandalar Mountains. The Loa warned the tribe's mystics of severe consequences should they disturb the black stones. For many years, none of the trolls dared disobey. But curiosity eventually won out. A group of rebellious trolls plumbed the forbidden mound. They discovered that the black stones were not mere rocks, They were the jagged hide of a monstrous creature. None of the trolls had ever seen anything like it. They believed it to be an undiscovered Loa, and a powerful one at that, considering that the other spirits were frightened of it. The trolls performed vile rituals and living sacrifices to awaken the slumbering monstrosity. Roused by the blood offerings, a gigantic Cuthraxi general emerged from its long slumber and ruthlessly slaughtered all those who had revived it. The trolls were unaware that this was Kithix, the being who had survived the encounter with Keeper Tyr. Gravely wounded, the Cuthrax had fled southwest to what would be known as the Zandalar Mountains before collapsing into a deep hibernation. Reeling from its presence, the ancient Loa inhabiting the area had buried Kithix beneath the earth so that no other creature would disturb it. The awoken Cuthrax looked upon troll civilization with contempt, for it was but a pale shadow of the black empire of eons past. Kithix knew it would delight the old gods to see this pitiful civilization rent to ashes. The Cuthrax reached out with its mind and found a race of creatures it could control, the Akir. In the ages after the fall of the Black Empire, these insectoids had remained hidden in small warrens and tunnels beneath the ground. Kithix rallied the Akiri swarms, driving them to make war and establish their dominance over Azeroth once again. As the Cuthrax expanded its power and recovered, the insectoids began building a vast subterranean empire known as Ajakir. Kithix patiently watched and waited as the Akiri ranks swelled in number. When the time was right, the Cuthrax led the insectoids from their underground empire, and they swept across the land. The trolls' experience as hunters made them formidable foes, but the Akiri threat was unlike any they had ever faced. Numerous smaller tribes fell before the unrelenting insectoids' legions. As the Akir encroached perilously close to the Zandalar Mountains, the Zandalari moved to act. They united the disparate troll tribes into a single mighty force, which they called the Empire of Zul. The members of this newly forged society would put aside their differences and work together to destroy the Akir. The Zandalari took on the role of commanding the troll armies. With their temple city looming high in the mountains, they could detect enemy movements and direct attacks at weak points. Under the Zandalari's guidance, the other trolls used ambush tactics in the surrounding jungles to whittle down the enemy's numbers. Elsewhere, revered priests summoned the Loa to assail their enemies. These ferocious wild gods joined the troll warriors in battle, ripping through the Akiri ranks and even wounding Kithix. The Akir were forced to retreat before they could mount a proper siege on the sacred mountains. Kithix, gravely wounded by the Loa, fled to the northeast with a contingent of its closest Akiri followers. There, it planned to regain its strength while the insectoids continued their war against the trolls. Though they had driven the Akir away, the Zandalari knew that their enemy still posed a grave threat. The insectoids, if left unchecked, would attack outlying troll territories. At the Zandalari's behest, the other tribes moved out to hunt down the Akir. The trolls quickly learned it was not enough to simply kill the insectoids. If any Akir escaped underground, they would establish a new colony and rise up again later. To permanently end the threat, no corner of the continent could be left unguarded. Thus, the Zandalari convinced the most power-hungry troll factions to establish new strongholds across Azeroth. Chief among these groups were the Amani, Gurubashi, and Drakari. After defeating the Akir, they could claim the fertile new lands for themselves without any competition. The ambitious tribes readily agreed. The Drakari pushed into the frigid north against a colony of Akir, but the trolls faced a weapon they had never expected: corrupted Tolvir. A small group of the Titan-Forged who dwelled outside Ulduar had been captured and enthralled by the Akir. These ferocious stone Tolvir, known as obsidian destroyers, almost overpowered the Drakari. But years of battle had shaped the tribe into cunning fighters, and they devised brilliant ways to topple and shatter their foes. The Gurubashi also encountered corrupted Titan-Forged. These trolls had ventured southwest, where the Akir had overrun Ankh-Raj, the prison complex housing the old god Cthulhu. Upon infiltrating the stronghold, the insectoids had enslaved the Anubiseth giants who guarded the prison. Early engagements between the Gurubashi and the Akir proved disastrous for the trolls. The insectoids and their mighty Anubiseths slaughtered several large Gurubashi encampments. Thereafter, the Zandalari instructed Gurubashi priests to separate their tribe into smaller, more mobile raiding groups instead of large armies. This new tactic allowed them to constantly harass the Akir, bleeding the insectoid armies dry over a period of many years. Though they were never able to completely wipe out the Akir, the Gurubashi eventually won uncontested control of the surrounding territory. Meanwhile, the Amani had set out to destroy Kithix. They tracked the Cuthrax's trail far to the northeastern woodlands, cutting through an unending mass of Akiri guardians. In a final savage battle, the entire tribe flung itself in a suicidal attack against Kithix and its remaining insectoid minions. Only a tiny fraction of the troll army survived. Even so, the Cuthrax succumbed to its tireless hunters. Though the cost was high, the fearsome reputation of the Amani became legend among the other tribes. Atop the site where they had killed Kithix, the trolls established a new settlement. It would one day grow into a sprawling temple city known as Suleiman. With the Cuthrax gone, the Akir no longer fought with as much ferocity or purpose. The war between the trolls and the Akir shifted dramatically. Extermination of the Akir became the trolls' new imperative. After many centuries of brutal fighting, the trolls shattered the Akir Empire, containing the insectoids in the far northern and far southern reaches of the continent. Central Kalimdor was permanently scoured of their presence. The surviving Akir fortified their underground colonies against further troll aggression. They showed no more interest in fighting. In time, the trolls proclaimed themselves victorious. Without war to bind them together, the troll factions grew ever more distant and insular. The far-flung strongholds of the different tribes blossomed into vibrant homes, temple cities, and eventually empires in their own right. The Zandalari withdrew to their mountain plateaus to pursue spiritual knowledge, but they would always maintain an immense influence over the disparate troll societies. The Nerubians, Kiraji, and Mantid, three distinct cultures, would arise from the Akir Empire. The insectoids in the north gathered near the underground prison of Yogg-Saron. Due to their proximity to the old god, these Akir would gradually evolve into a race called the Nerubians. Their kingdom would become known as Asjalnerub. The Akir in the southwest made their home in Ankaraj, the conquered prison complex of Cthulhu. The captive old god's foul presence would slowly warp the Akir's forms over time, molding them into a race known as the Kiraji. The Akir in the southeast congregated where Yasharj's essence still polluted the land. These insectoids would eventually transform into a race called the Mantid. Even before the Akir Empire fell, they would establish the great colony of Mantives near the Vale of Eternal Blossoms. The Mantid cycle, in the later stages of the war with the trolls, one enclave of Akir gathered at the southern edge of Kalimdor. Below the roots of the great Kaipari trees, they established a new empire. These insectoids, known thereafter as the Mantid, saw no purpose in continuing a battle they knew they were not strong enough to win. Such restraint was unusual among the insectoids, but then, so was the Mantid's reasoning. They still fervently worshipped the old gods, believing that their ancient masters would one day rise from their prisons and reestablish their dominion over Azeroth. The best way to serve the entities was not to expend the Mantid's strength, but to conserve it, refine it, and sharpen it. The Mantid would grow stronger without jeopardizing their survival. Though a revered empress ruled over the day-to-day activities of the Mantid, another group controlled the insectoid's destiny. The members of this group called themselves the Klaxi, meaning priest, in their native tongue. They guided the actions of the empress, and the Mantid swarms in the hopes of preserving and strengthening their race. Rather than seek retribution on the trolls, the Klaxi turned their gaze on another enemy. Nearby dwelled the Mogu, mighty Titan forged, who had guarded the Vale of Eternal Blossoms for untold ages. The Mantid found themselves drawn to the mystical valley. They were not aware of it at the time, but they were attracted to the lingering presence of the slain old god Yasharj, whose festering heart had been locked away beneath the veil by Hykeper Ra. To seek out the dark essence beneath the veil, the Mantid launched a surprise attack against the Mogu. The Titan forged narrowly withstood the swarm and drove them back to the Kaipari forests. The Klaxi did not consider their defeat a failure. The surviving Mantid warriors had matured, grown more powerful and cunning. The Klaxi patiently waited 100 years before assaulting the Mogu again. They dispatched a new generation of young Mantid to besiege the Titan Forged. Once again, the survivors returned stronger. Thus began the Mantid cycle. Every century, a new Mantid clutch made war upon the Mogu. The ferocious battles removed the weak from the swarm, and only the strongest returned to the Kaipari trees. Within only a few cycles, Mantid civilization had become tightly honed and rigid, utterly focused on eradicating weakness and empowering the mightiest of their kind. The Mogu marked the change with concern. They launched a campaign into Mantives itself to ensure that the cycle would not come again. The attack came at an inauspicious time for the Mantid. It was decades before the next clutch of warriors would hatch. The Mantid were few, and the Mogu were many. Initially, the Titan Forged devastated the insected ranks, even the strongest survivors of past swarms. Only one Mantid, Corvin, emerged to turn the tide of battle. Armed with blades forged of Kaipari amber, the warrior eviscerated the Mogu ranks, thwarting their attack and sending them into retreat. So great was Corvin's skill that many Mantid came to believe that he was capable of cheating death itself. The high elders of the Claxi proclaimed Corvin a paragon and promised his deeds would become legend among their kind. But the honored warrior was still not satisfied. He knew it was only chance that he arose in his race's greatest hour of need. He did not want to leave the Mantid's defense to chance alone. The Claxi agreed and tasked him with finding a solution. After years of experimenting with Kaipari sap, Corvin discovered that a living creature could be preserved within an amber cocoon, potentially for thousands of years. If the Claxi placed their greatest warriors in these cocoons, they could be awakened whenever they were needed to avert disaster. Corvin became the first to undergo this preservation. In honor of his deeds, the Claxi named him Corvin the Prime, the first of many paragons to come. As he lay undisturbed in his amber tomb, the great cycle he had almost single-handedly saved continued on, remaining unbroken for countless generations. The age of 100 kings, 15,000 years before the dark portal, though Highkeeper Ra had not been seen in millennia. His loyal Mogu maintained their vigil over the veil of eternal blossoms, bravely fighting off each successive Mantid swarm. Their faith that the Highkeeper would one day return endured through century after century of hardships. Yet that faith vanished once the curse of flesh manifested within the Mogu ranks. For the first time, the Mogu faced mortality. Fear and uncertainty took root in their hearts. Small disagreements spiraled into conflict, violence, and bloodshed. Packs of Mogu banded together. Clans and warlords emerged by the score and engaged in brutal power struggles. Those who triumphed were quickly toppled by rivals. Through it all, their culture and language, even their sense of purpose and identity, began to change. This period of turmoil and conflict became known as the Age of 100 Kings. And the Mogu edged perilously close to destroying themselves from within. Only their basest instincts prevented annihilation. At the beginning of each new manted swarm, the Mo-Gu's petty conflicts would die down. The various clans would reluctantly band together to stand against the manted. But once the swarm had retreated, internal hostilities would surface once again. As the Mo-Gu battled the manted, a number of other races arose in the region. Many of these creatures were drawn to the latent powers emanating from the veil of eternal blossoms. Among these wondrous new races were the Jinyu fish-like mystics who dwelled in the rivers and lakes. A bold and mischievous race of monkeys, known as the Hosen, also came to inhabit the dense jungles that encircled much of the vale. But by far, the most intelligent of these newcomers were the wise Pandaren. The emergence of so much life around the vale piqued the interest of 4 wild gods. Their names were Zuen, the white tiger Yulan, the jade serpent Chi-Chi, the red crane, and Niuzao, the black ox. Zuen and his fellow wild gods gathered at the vale to watch over and guide the myriad life forms that dwelled in the area. Though the warlike activities of the Mo-Gu often troubled them, the wild gods delighted in watching the other races flourish. In particular, Zuen and the other demigods developed close ties with the Pandaren, in large part due to their penchant for peace. The Pandaren considered the wild gods, whom they called the August Celestials, to be benevolent deities. They formed a system of worship devoted to the extraordinary beings. In return, the wild gods bestowed knowledge on the Pandaren, nurturing their ties to philosophy and the natural world. At the behest of the August Celestials, the Pandaren formed a culture that sought peace and harmony with the surrounding environment. Yet soon, a new Mo-Gu leader would arise to challenge these philosophies. His name was Lei Shen, and his rule would threaten not only the mortal races of the Vale, but the August Celestials as well. The Thunder King, 15,001 to 200 years before the Dark Portal, as the Pandaren and other races prospered around the Vale of Eternal Blossoms, the Mo-Gu continued their endless squabbling. It was during this cycle of violence that a warrior named Lei Shen came to power. A descendant of a minor warlord, young Lei Shen was thoroughly accustomed to the brutality of clan warfare. Despite his skill and success in battle, he saw the incessant conflicts and political maneuvering as a betrayal of the Mo-Gu's potential. Nevertheless, he remained stalwart as a vassal for his father. A close advisor eventually betrayed and murdered Lei Shen's father. Almost all of the fallen warlord's clansmen sought refuge in the ranks of other clans, abandoning Lei Shen. Only a few loyal armsmen refused to leave his side. Rather than seek retribution and perpetuate the violence, Lei Shen chose to go into exile. He wandered the land, meditating on what he saw as the failures of his kind. Soon Lei Shen desired answers his intellect and reason could no longer provide. He set off in search of the Mo-Gu's long-absent master, Highkeeper Ra. In recent centuries, the Highkeeper had become known as Ra-Den, meaning Master Ra in the New Mogu tongue. Few of Lei Shen's kind even believed he still lived. Why would their ancient creator have allowed them to suffer from the curse of flesh? Lei Shen believed Ra-Den had a plan, a master purpose, and that the current trials of the Mogu were merely a test. Perhaps it was even the will of the Titans themselves. After all, Ra-Den was their living instrument. After years of searching, Lei Shen located the entrance to the hidden vaults beneath the land north of the Veil. Sacred chambers that the Mogu had all but forgotten due to their ceaseless warring. There he found the Highkeeper, sitting quietly in the stillness beneath the earth. Ra-Den showed no reaction to the young Mogu's intrusion. The Highkeeper said nothing, even as Lei Shen began to ask him questions about the Mogu's true purpose. Days and weeks passed, and Lei Shen grew frustrated with his master's silence. Finally, the Mogu realized that Ra was not contemplating some subtle plan, was not engrossed in the work of the Titans. The Highkeeper had simply given up. The suffering of the Mogu had been the result of an absentee master and nothing more. Lei Shen unleashed his anger on Ra, accusing him of abandoning the Titans and their purpose. His harsh words roused the Highkeeper from his stupor. Ra took Lei Shen to the nearby Thundering Mountain, where unending storms roared and split the heavens. No Mogu had dared scale its slopes before, for the mountain was believed to be a forbidden place. Inside a massive, ornate vault, Ra-Den summoned the lingering power of Aman'Thul and showed Lei Shen the answers he wanted. The Titans of the Pantheon were dead, murdered by one of their own. Their final hope was the world of Azeroth itself, but it was already infested with creatures of the void. The Highkeeper had assumed that this knowledge would shatter Lei Shen's soul as it had his own. Yet the Mogu reacted in a way Ra-Den never expected. Lei Shen decided that if his master had no interest in continuing the Titan's purpose, he would do it himself. Without warning, he struck out and incapacitated Ra-Den. Lei Shen then bound the mighty being in enchanted iron bands. He stole not only Ra-Den's incredible power, but also the contained power of Aman'Thul. Might beyond understanding flooded through Lei Shen's soul. He imprisoned Ra-Den within the Thundering Mountain, ignoring the Highkeeper's rage and confusion at the betrayal. When Lei Shen descended the mountain and met with his remaining armsmen, they were in awe of him. Rumors of Lei Shen's newfound might spread among the Mogu clans. Some believed he had torn out the heart of a god and eaten it. A few claimed he had harnessed the ancient powers of the Veil itself. Still others whispered that he was a Titan reborn. Yet all of the stories had one fact in common. This Thunder King had demanded that all Mogu bow before him. He claimed the birthright of the Titans, and he would destroy all those who refused to yield to his will. Thereafter, Lei Shen set out to unify the Mogu and forge them a new destiny as the masters of Azeroth and guardians of its world soul. The petty squabbling and warfare that had plagued their kind would no longer be tolerated. With lightning and thunder at his command, Lei Shen crushed all opposition. The fortunate ones were killed quickly. The unfortunate ones were kept in chains for centuries. Initially, most of the Mogu rallied to him out of fear, but his miracles soon inspired devotion. The Thunder King had mastered the enchanted tools of the Keepers. One of these was the engine of Nalakshaw, a powerful device that Lei Shen had discovered beneath the land north of the Vale. Using this extraordinary machine, the Mogu began shaping flesh and stone into new living creatures. They even found a way to reverse the curse of flesh among themselves. Under Lei Shen, a period of prosperity and brutality gripped the Vale. For the Mogu, it was the beginning of a glorious new empire. Yet, for the region's other races, it marked the start of an age of tyranny. The madness of Lei Shen, the decision to abandon any claim to his father's power, had spared Lei Shen's life. When a clan's leader was killed, it was customary for rivals to immediately murder his family and thus exterminate the clan lineage forever. Lei Shen's meditations were seen as a sign of despair and madness. Most assumed he would never be a threat to any Mogu ever again. The two empires. As Lei Shen's empire expanded in scope and power, he soon regarded all living creatures within his domain as his servants. The curse of flesh was a weakness, he reasoned, and although not all of the Mogu might ever be fully cleansed of the flaw, other beings of flesh would always be beneath them. The Thunder King began a campaign of enslavement in the lands surrounding the Vale. The wise Jinyu had established a small empire of their own. Though they fought valiantly, the Jinyu ultimately crumbled before the might of Lei Shen. The Mogu sacked their towns and left their entire civilization in ruins. Upon learning of the Jinyu's fate, the Pandaren fled to Kunlai Summit, north of the Vale. There, they sought the protection of Zuen, the White Tiger. When Lei Shen brought his armies to the foothills, he challenged Zuen to a duel that would decide the fate of the Pandaren. Zuen accepted, and for many days, the great battle between the White Tiger and the Thunder King shook the skies over Kunlai. In the end, Zuen could not match Lei Shen's stolen Titan power. Lei Shen chained Zuen near the peak of the mount, forcing the august celestial to watch as the Mogu bound the Pandaren to slavery. Fearing that the Pandaren's peaceful philosophies would undermine his rule, Lei Shen forbade them from learning how to read or write, or even how to speak any language other than the Mogu tongue. To disobey was to be killed in slow, brutal fashion. The Mogu forged their greatest palaces and monuments with the blood and sweat of their subjugated races. Soon, the empire boasted a unified language, an established system of weights and measurements, and the first set of written laws in Azeroth, brutal codes that enshrined the Mogu's place above the other creatures. Lei Shen also forced his slaves to act as soldiers, or to expand the crude fortifications once used to defend the Vale from the Mantid. Thus was born the Serpent's Spine, a massive stone wall separating the Mogu from the insected lands. When existing slaves perished or proved inefficient, Lei Shen shaped new ones with the power of the engine of Nalakshaw. This led to the creation of myriad beings, such as the diminutive yet resilient Grummels and the barbaric reptilian Sorok. The Mogu Empire quickly drew notice from other civilizations on Azeroth. The Zandalari trolls, in particular, were amazed at the otherworldly powers wielded by the Thunder King. One of the Zandalari's leaders, a revered high priest named Zulethra, saw in the Mogu a golden opportunity. He and a retinue of trolls journeyed to the Thunder King's domain with a simple proposition. The Mogu might hold the power of this world, but the trolls held the knowledge of the land. The two empires would make each other great and teach each other their secrets. Once they were allied, nothing on Azeroth would dare oppose them. The offer intrigued Lei Shen. For the first time, he had met other living creatures who sought to master their environment rather than live in peace with it. The Mogu rarely ventured far from their lands. Superstitions and the deep-seated duty of protecting the Vale still influenced their actions. They could explore the world from a position of ignorance, or they could ally with the trolls and learn its mysteries quickly. In truth, both leaders plotted betrayal. Zulethra believed the Zandalari could steal Lei Shen's godlike powers once they learned the Mogu secrets, and the Thunder King schemed to enslave the Zandalari the moment they ceased being useful. Yet they kept their plans concealed, even from their own people, and publicly brokered an agreement. In exchange for the Zandalari's knowledge, the Mogu would train them in the ways of arcane magic. They also promised the Zandalari a swath of fertile land near the Vale. Lei Shen even made a secret agreement with Zulethra. The Thunder King had devised a method to fully revive his spirit if he was ever killed, but he did not trust his own servants with such knowledge. The Mogu were a power-hungry people, and they would likely try to claim the empire for themselves if Lei Shen fell. Only the Zandalari would hold the key to resurrecting Lei Shen. Without him, the trolls knew they would never fully learn the secrets of the arcane, nor would they be able to claim his awesome power. Though both leaders continued scheming, their betrayals would never come to fruition. Indeed, they found each other to be invaluable allies, and their pact endured for many years. The Hosen betrayal. At the height of their empire, the Jinyu held close ties with the Hosen. Both agreed to help the other withstand the onslaught of the Mogu. Yet, on the eve of the Jinyu's final stand against Lei Shen, the Hosen betrayed them. The Jinyu's so-called allies had secretly pledged their loyalties to the Thunder King in exchange for preferential treatment, a promise that was never kept. This act of treachery ensured the Jinyu's defeat and ignited a bitter racial feud between them and the Hosen that would last for generations. Fate of the August Celestials. After Lei Shen imprisoned the White Tiger, the other Celestials came to the aid of the Pandaren. Yet, like Suen, they all succumbed to the Thunder King. Thereafter, Lei Shen prohibited worship of the Celestials on pain of death. The Pandaren lost many of their ties to the wild gods, but not all. A few fearless slaves, in secret, carried on the teachings of the Celestials. Thunder falls. While Lei Shen consolidated his empire, the Tolvir guarding Uldum struggled to endure the curse of flesh. The malady had spread throughout their ranks, slowly weakening the Titan forged. All the while, the Tolvir waited patiently for word from Highkeeper Ra or his Mo-Gu servants in the east. Eventually, the Tolvir received a summons from a Mo-Gu leader calling himself the Thunder King. They had heard nothing about the rise of the Mo-Gu Empire. Curious, the Tolvir dispatched ambassadors to the east. When they reached the edges of the Thunder King's domain, they were stunned to see how advanced their Mo-Gu cousins had become. In some instances, the Mo-Gu had even managed to reverse the curse of flesh. Lei Shen warmly greeted the Tolvir and showed them the wonders of his empire, from the immense serpent's spine wall to the gilded imperial palaces of the Vale. The Tolvir were shocked at the deplorable treatment of the mortal races that had been enslaved by the Mo-Gu. Even so, the Tolvir were not stirred to action. Their prime concern was the protection of the Keeperot machineries in Uldum. The Thunder King wholeheartedly agreed. The works of the Keepers, such as the Forge of Origination in Uldum, were of utmost importance. And so Lei Shen announced he was claiming them as part of his empire. He revealed that he had defeated Ra-Den and taken his power. Therefore, Lei Shen claimed that he now held dominion over the Keeper's instruments. With the engine of Nalakshaw and the Forge of Origination at his command, he could remake Azeroth as he saw fit. As fellow Titan forged, the Tolvir would ascend to a place of honor in the Mo-Gu Empire, but Lei Shen would be at its head, now and forever. Upon learning that Lei Shen had betrayed Highkeeper Ra, the Tolvir grew furious. They refused the Thunder King's offer, vowing never to serve a traitor, and stormed out of his tyrannical empire. Lei Shen allowed the ambassadors to leave, but warned them he would take what he wanted by force. Their armies could not possibly stand against his. So confident was the Thunder King that he invited Zulethra to witness what he claimed would be the Mo-Gu Empire's greatest victory yet. The elderly Zandalari leader agreed. Lei Shen had artificially extended the troll's life. But once all of the Keeper's works were under Mo-Gu control, they would unlock the secrets of immortality. Almost all of the highest-ranking Zandalari leaders accompanied Zulethra as an honor guard, also expecting to return to their capital of Zuldazar with the gift of eternal life. Lei Shen led his Mo-Gu host and the trolls to the west. The Zandalari had heard tales of the lands near Uldum, but they had never seen them with their own eyes. Pristine lakes and waterfalls dotted the region's lush jungles. It was a paradise, teeming with undiscovered life and wonders as far as the eye could see. The full might of Lei Shen's empire trampled over the land, stopping just short of the monolithic pyramids that composed the keeper's bastion of Uldum. Only a small group of Tolvir emerged from the fortress to resist the Mogu. Lei Shen mocked their numbers, for he knew that he alone could crush them. Indeed, the Tolvir had known that defeating the Thunder King's forces in battle was impossible. As Lei Shen had marched toward Uldum, the Titan Forged had prepared a final defense. The Forge of Origination locked beneath the fortress. Rather than using it to its full potential, which would eradicate all life on Azeroth, the Tolvir had configured the Forge of Origination to scour only the nearby land. As Lei Shen led the charge, gloating in his impending victory, the Tolvir activated the weapon. Deep within the earth, the device rumbled to life. The earth heaved and buckled as waves of force erupted from Uldum, bathing the surrounding land in the energies of uncreation. The Tolvir defenders, and nearly every other creature on the surface of Uldum that day died instantly. Creatures all across Kalimdor witnessed the flash on the southern horizon. When it subsided, Lei Shen and his allies were no more. The unleashed power had also purged the area around Uldum of almost all life, leaving only a cracked and barren desert behind. Pockets of plant and animal life would slowly return over the millennia, but the vast jungle would never fully regain its vibrancy. The surviving Tolvir within Uldum worked to ensure that no one would ever again attempt to claim such power. They shrouded the few mountain passes that led into the region with magic. In doing so, the Tolvir effectively sealed Uldum off from the eyes of mortals. The Tolvir's noble sacrifice had kept the Forge of Origination out of Lei Shen's hands and prevented any other Mogu emperor from daring to follow in his footsteps. The deaths of Lei Shen and the upper caste of the Zandalari left massive power vacuums in both empires. Before the Tolvir shrouded Uldum in their grand illusion, a handful of Thunder King loyalists recovered Lei Shen's corpse from the region. They brought it back to the empire and enshrined it within the Tomb of Conquerors. Yet, with most of the Zandalari leadership dead, there was no one to revive the Thunder King. A succession of emperors followed Lei Shen, but none would ever wield as much power as he had. The Zandalari, too, spent generations attempting to recover from the losses at Uldum. The catastrophic event had struck a mortal blow to both empires. Neither would ever regain its former glory, and in time, both would crumble and fall. The Pandaren Revolution, 12,000 years before the Dark Portal. The Thunder King's death weakened the Mogu, but their civilization continued lording over the Vale. The Empire's slaves suffered greatly under Lei Shen's barbarous successors, each ruler seemingly crueler than the last. The final Mogu Emperor, Laofei, earned the title Slavebinder early in his tenure. He lived a life of decadence, confident that his supply of cowed slaves would never diminish. To earn their compliance, Laofei would tear apart slave families for even mild transgressions. Parents were separated, Children were dispatched to the serpent's spine to die as fodder before the mantid swarm. It was this very fate that befell the family of a Pandaran brewmaster named Kang. His son was sent to the mantid, and his wife died trying to stop it. After the Mo-gu left his home and his life in ruins, Kang nearly succumbed to despair. But soon, his thoughts circled around a particular question. Why? Why did the Mo-gu inflict such pain? Kang meditated on the slavery of his people, and he reached a radical conclusion. The extreme cruelty toward slaves was not a sign of the Mo-gu's strength. It was a symptom of their weakness. They had grown dependent on their servants. Without them, they were nothing. Kang devoted his life to exposing the Mo-gu's vulnerability. Apart from those who were sent to defend the serpent's spine, no slave was ever permitted to touch a weapon, a crime punishable by death. Thus Kang taught himself to use his own body as one. To elude the ever-watchful eyes of the Mo-gu, he learned to disguise his attacks as an artistic dance. When he had finally mastered his techniques, he challenged his fellow slaves to strike him. None could. His dancing, his flowing movements, kept him free of harm. The slaves begged Kang to teach them how to fight unarmed. Kang did, and word of this strange new combat method spread quickly among the oppressed peoples of the Mo-gu Empire. Hundreds of slaves adopted Kang's teachings and devoted themselves to learning this newfound art, known thereafter as the Way of the Monk. When rumors of the movement reached Mo-gu ears, Kang relocated his followers to Kunlai Summit, fully aware that his apprentices were not yet strong enough to topple their oppressors. In secret, the Pandaran rebels built a monastery among the wind-lashed peaks and began to further train themselves as instruments of justice. It was at Kunlai Summit that Kang found something utterly unexpected: the prison of Zuen, the White Tiger. Kang communed often with the august celestial, learning the secrets of inner strength that lay within every heart. The Pandaran master passed along Zuen's wisdom to his followers. At last, the Pandaran monks were ready to fight. Their first major victory came at the Mo-gu Shan Vaults, the sacred chambers that housed the engine of Nalakshaw. There, the rebels successfully drove the Mo-gu away from the source of their flesh-shaping power. The Pandaran's devastating attack prevented the Mo-gu from creating any new twisted soldiers. This single victory not only heartened the Pandaren, but also drew other races to the rebellion. The Hosen, the Jinyu, the Grummels, and a burly race of bovine creatures, called the Yongal, all joined the effort to topple the Mo-gu Empire. Bit by bit, the revolution grew. Kang was right. The Mo-gu had grown too reliant on their slaves, and as more rebelled, the empire fell into chaos. The Grummels, masters of communication and trade, disrupted Mo-gu supply lines. The mighty Yongal led raiding parties to wreak havoc in the northwest. The wily Hosen dug tunnels to infiltrate the mightiest Mo-gu strongholds. The mystic Jinyu communed with the waters of the land to glean the future. telling Kang's forces where to strike and when to run. Eventually, Lao Fei's forces retreated to the Vale of Eternal Blossoms, the royal seat of the Mo Gu Empire. Kang knew the enchanted land could sustain them for as long as they desired. Thus, to defeat the Mo Gu, the rebels needed to expose themselves and launch an attack. Kang did not hesitate to do so. He personally led the charge, striking deep into the Vale. He fought Lao Fei hand to hand and defeated him, but the Pandaren sustained mortal wounds in return. The slavebender and the former slave died together. Flushed with victory, some of the freed slaves considered seeking revenge against the surviving Mo Gu, butchering them as they had butchered their vassals for millennia. Yet one of Kang's most promising students calmed their bloodlust. As a secretive keeper of Pandaren history, the pupil Song had memorized many of Master Kang's philosophies and tales. Song retold Kang's stories again and again to the liberated slaves, reminding them about his commitment to true justice, not revenge. He walked from one end of the fallen empire to the other for the rest of his life, sharing Kang's wisdom and urging all creatures to find emotional balance within themselves. As Song's story spread, others began to follow in his footsteps. More and more Pandaren traveled the land, telling stories and encouraging inner peace in all they met. These lorewalkers, as they would eventually be named, became not only skilled storytellers, but also conflict mediators, diffusing tense situations with allegories and parables that would help all sides see reason and find a middle ground. So began a time of peace and prosperity in and around the Vale of Eternal Blossoms. The Pandaren, along with the other races that called the region home, flourished. A new empire, one built on the principles of justice, wisdom, and benevolence, emerged to watch over the war-torn land. The Shah, when Yasharj died, its blighted remains scattered across the Vale of Eternal Blossoms and the surrounding regions. In time, the old god's evil seeped into the land itself. During his journeys, Song became keenly aware of this dark power that lurked in the earth. Yasharj's lingering essence latched onto and amplified negative emotions, giving rise to malevolent spirits known as the Shah. By spreading Kang's teachings, Song hoped that he could help the Pandaren and other races negate the old god's influence and nullify the Shah. Yongle migration. When the Mo Gu Empire was at its height, an intelligent bovine race known as the Yongle roamed the grassy plains of central Kalimdor. These burly creatures lived in harmony with nature, following the guidance of the wise demigod Cenarius. Unlike many of the other wild gods, Cenarius was more humanoid in appearance. The majestic half-stag, draped in a cloak of flowers and vines, often walked among the nomadic Yongle. He taught these creatures the secrets of the wilds, and he delighted in watching them flourish. Eventually, the Yongle grew weary of sharing hunting grounds with nearby trolls and decided to seek new lands. Although their beloved demigod Cenarius urged them to stay and make peace, they set out to the south. They hunted and foraged for food all the way to the edge of the Mo-Gu Empire. The emperor of the time, Kiang the Merciless, found the Yongal and their immense physical strength fascinating. He ordered his flesh shapers to capture the nomads and transform them into even mightier and more intelligent servants, while at the same time tempering their more savage instincts. The Yongal suffered under the tyranny of Mo-Gu oppression for generations, until they rose up alongside the other slaves to overthrow their cruel masters. Although the Yongal gained their freedom, they had lost much. Their strong oral storytelling tradition had all but vanished due to strict Mo-Gu laws that forbade them from discussing their heritage. Much of their rich history had faded away. Some Yongal clung to the faint memories and incomplete myths of a benevolent demigod who had once watched over them. Others insisted that the Yongal should abandon all tradition and forge a new destiny by force. The disagreements grew heated and, on certain occasions, even led to bloodshed. Most Yongal despised the violence and set out to the north, determined to return to a life of hunting and living among the spirits of nature. Some of the more nomadic tribes traveled all the way across the continent, only stopping when they reached the frigid climes near the storm peaks. Other tribes settled in the balmy areas of central Kalimdor and reunited with their ancient benefactor, Cenarius. Returning to their ancestral hunting grounds allowed them to rediscover their old traditions. Those who studied with Cenarius learned the druidic magic of the natural world, while others mastered the arts of wielding shamanic powers. Yet not all Yongal left the Vale. Those who stayed behind quickly found themselves at odds with the Pandaren and other liberated slaves. The Mo-Gu flesh shaping had not completely subdued the Yongal's bold nature, and conflict after conflict ignited over matters of land and resources. Fearing an open war with their former allies, the Yongal moved west, settling outside the Serpent's Spine. That left them exposed to the Mantid, and every 100 years, the swarm would threaten to exterminate their people. The Mantid cycle and constant infighting among these Yongal led to a strong warrior tradition, one that would make them far more savage than the tribes that had gone north. Over the passing of generations, the energies emanating from the Well of Eternity and Keeperot machineries around Kalimdor changed the Yongal in unique ways. Those near the Vale would keep the name Yongal, though they grew more warlike than their distant cousins. Those in central Kalimdor, close to the Well of Eternity, would take the name Tauren. The tribes that ventured to the north near the Forge of Wills would be called Tonka, and they would adapt to the region's icy terrain. These far-flung groups maintained contact with one another for many years. But when the Great Sundering eventually shattered the world, all connection between the tribes was lost. Zandalari invasion, 11,900 years before the Dark Portal. The Zandalari had always maintained a distant relationship with the Mo-Gu following Lei Shen's death. Though the trolls found the Mogu's knowledge of arcane magic useful, they loathed the constant intra-clan strife and tense political maneuvering. When it became clear that no Mogu clan would establish total dominance, the Zandalari refrained from pledging their loyalties to any one faction in particular. But they never forgot the promise Lei Shen had made to them. A large plot of land near the Vale of Eternal Blossoms would forever belong to the trolls. When at long last the Mogu Empire crumbled, the Zandalari saw an opportunity to take what they believed was rightfully theirs. They did not move immediately. Internal debate raged in the Zandalari capital of Zuldazar about whether the territory should be taken by diplomacy or force. In the end, it was a descendant of the great high priest Zulathra who made the strongest case. His name was Mengazi, and he knew that the Pandaren would be unlikely to honor the Zandalari's agreement with the Mogu. The former slaves had also overthrown their masters, and as such, they could be strong enough to mount a fierce resistance against the trolls if given time to prepare. To succeed in claiming their land, the trolls would need to strike without warning, and with enough force to shatter the Pandaren's will. To this end, the trolls marched south, intent on seizing a fertile region north of Kunlai Summit. The Zandalari stormed the main settlement in the area, a tranquil Pandaren farming village. Imbued with mystic powers and riding atop colossal saurian war mounts, the trolls slaughtered almost every single resident of the settlement. The Zandalari ranks then pushed into the Jade Forest, a dense jungle that had become the heart of the newly established Pandaren Empire. When word of the invasion reached other Pandaren settlements, panic seized them. No standing army existed to thwart the trolls. In the decades since the slave revolution, few had seen the need to carry on the militaristic ways of the Mogu, preferring instead to let all residents live in peace without an overarching authority. The only real fighting force was an order of monks, charged by the Pandaren Emperor to patrol the Serpent's Spine and stand against the periodic Mantid swarm. Though the monks raced from the Serpent's Spine to defend their lands against the trolls, they found themselves hopelessly outnumbered and outmaneuvered. The trolls were employing a form of warfare none had ever seen, descending into battle on the backs of reptilian terrorwings and giant bats. The Pandaren had no means to counter these ferocious aerial attacks. Ultimately, salvation came from a young Pandaren named Jiang. When she was but a child, she had found a cloud serpent hatchling, alone and badly injured after a terrible storm had destroyed his nest. At the time, the Pandaren regarded the flying cloud serpents as untamable and violent beasts, but Jiang nursed him back to health and befriended him. Those in her village often saw them flying the skies together. As the monks fought a losing battle atop the cliffs of the Jade Forest, Jiang and her serpentine companion, Lo, swooped down from the clouds. Lo's fury and fire broke the Zandalari ranks, forcing them to retreat. News of the victory spread throughout the empire, and others followed in Jiang's footsteps. They tamed the powerful cloud serpents, and soon a small army arose to fly into battle at Jiang's side. These brave Pandaren became known as the Order of the Cloud Serpent. The tide of the war had turned. The trolls knew there was little they could do to win by conventional means. So Mengazi turned to a final tactic, resurrecting the Thunder King, Lei Shen. Lei Shen had granted the Zandalari the secret to his revival, not trusting any of his Mogu underlings to do it for him if he were ever killed. The trolls knew the Thunder King would have the power to purge the troublesome serpent riders and destroy any army on the ground. A pitched battle erupted near the Tomb of Conquerors, where Lei Shen's corpse was enshrined. Jiang sacrificed herself in a final, desperate attack, killing Mengazi. The other Zandalari soon broke ranks and fled back to their homeland in shame. Through her heroic act, Jiang had prevented the trolls from resurrecting the terrible Thunder King. There was great celebration throughout the empire, but also mourning over the lives lost, especially Jiang's. For decades after the conflict, Lo was seen circling the skies above the Jade Forest, as though searching for his old friend and rider. The other serpent riders honored Jiang's memory by codifying her teachings. Within the Order of the Cloud Serpent, her tradition of training and befriending the majestic creatures would survive for millennia to come. Thank you for listening. I hope you enjoyed this audio journey into Azeroth, the world of Warcraft. In our next episode, we will continue with Chapter 3.